Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Please take your seats comfortably. We are going to start in about a few seconds. And as I can see, our next speaker, keynote speaker, is also ready, but he is chit-chatting still. But a little announcement. Welcome back. Warmly welcome, and I hope that everyone is energized and full of caffeine and energy and sugar as well. But we need to move on. This is the second part of our conference, and it's the name of this part. As you can see, key success factors. As I said before the break, we are going to have 3 parallel sessions. This is an important information for all of you up here. And of course, for Niklas, you don't need to be worried that there are some people around the building. They are in 2 different additional spaces since we are preparing for 3 parallel discussion panels. And right now we are broadcasting live from this room to another one. So once again, hello. I hope that you can hear me and see me clearly, but I am not the most important person in the room. Niklas would be. And as I said, Niklas Blomberg, Executive Director at the Innovative Health Initiative Joint Undertaking, will be on the stage in a moment, but of course I would like to also introduce the main topic of this part of the conference, key success factors. Well, we are going to shift our focus to the challenges and conditions that shape real progress in life sciences, as we could see and hear during the previous discussion panel. It is quite important not only to be visionary and to think about ideas, but also to do things. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am speaking that long because I'm waiting for the signal that in additional spaces and rooms there are people who are ready to listen us. And yes, we are ready right now. Niklas Blomberg, once again, Executive Director at the Innovative Health Initiative Joint Undertaking. Welcome. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So the microphone. Yes, number 1. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction. I hope the broadcasting work. There is really no way for me to know that. But really big thanks to the organizers for inviting me. Really happy to be here. It's my second time in Kraków, and I've never been to Warsaw, so we can talk about that in the breaks. The Innovative Health Initiative is, Irene mentioned it this morning, we are a public-private partnership, part funded by the European Union and the health industries in Europe, so that's the pharmaceutical, the biotechnology, and the medical technology industries. But I'm not here to talk about the IHI. I am supposed to give a few pointers and a little bit of an impetus for the discussions in the panel this afternoon. And so the progress, or the focus of my talk is really on progress and really what do we need to focus on to get, if we want, a smarter, healthier Europe. And I think I'd really like to focus on that word progress. I mean, I think we're here because we believe that science drives progress in society in general and in health maybe in particular. And I think there's been ample evidence for that in the last 4 or 5 years. But really, I think the question is, what can we do to help to progress health? And what can we do to help to progress the competitiveness of European health industries? And so maybe I can share a few thoughts on what I think are Europe's strengths and how we can leverage those to make progress in health innovation. And so what I really would like to talk about is the sort of the mechanisms for progress. And so rather than to dive into metrics and key success factors, I think hopefully we can leave with a few areas that we can be debating over the rest of the afternoon and probably also over tomorrow. So why do we need progress in health innovation? Well, I think we'll all agree there is really no shortage of challenges in public health. There is a huge public health need. We had a very interesting conversation over lunch about mental health, about women's health. You can sort of walk through the whole of society and really feel the large public health challenges. But actually, if you think about it, so poor health is one of the major risks for people to exit paid work. And we know this actually because we have excellent research programs and research infrastructures in Europe. So that data comes from SHARE, which is one of the European social service, a long-standing research infrastructure. But we also have, of course, the aging population and how we deal with that. And that gives large challenges for the healthcare systems. I think we'll dive into that more. It's the workforce. Everyone talks about the workforce, the digital transition. But it's also the challenges of the chronic diseases, the shift from treating acute illness to managing chronic disease in societies, and what are we going to do around that, and how can we innovate around the healthcare systems. And finally, and I think we had that very well spelled out this morning, but the health industries are important to Europe. And we heard from Mr. Jacek on the local ecosystem here in Kraków, but if we look over the industries, it's about 2 million people who are directly employed in pharmaceutical and medtech industries. And that's about the same as aerospace and defense. So it's a big industry sector in Europe, and we really need to think about how do we actually innovate with that sector to make a societal change. And maybe that's another sort of similarity with the aerospace and defense sector. It is a sector that you really need to innovate in conjunction with society. It's not consumer products. And so what I would like to talk about is really how to focus on to get this smarter health for Europe. Irene talked about the political context, the Draghi report. We heard a lot about the challenges, and so rather than diving into it, I think we can actually summarize it in that Europe is really strong in science, but we have a declining share of R&D globally. And so despite the investments growing globally, we are losing out. And so that's the key point. But actually, and I think that's one of the takeaways for me from the Draghi report, is that excellent science is a really fundamental building block of competitiveness. You cannot have attractive investment unless you have that strong science base. And so when we look at the Draghi report, he makes a set of recommendations looking at the scientific excellence, but it's also things like how do we change the regulatory science, the clinical trials. I'll talk a little bit about that. How do we make a success of data? And how do we help to mobilize private R&D investments? There is another report which is also came last year, which I think is equally important, which is the Finnish President Niinistö that talked about how do we get a better prepared Europe. And there is a large chapter on health in that report. Clearly, health is a major part of preparedness. And one of the key conclusions is really this will not work without mobilizing the capabilities also of the private sector. So I think that's something we should bear in mind. So if we look at this then from the Draghi report, I think we can sort of pick out a number, we can call them drivers or enablers of European health innovation, so sort of transversal issues that are cutting across all of the innovation in health. So it's obviously biotechnology. We talked about small molecules this morning, but biotechnology, biological therapies, biomolecules, cell and increasingly tissue therapies, regenerative medicine is coming up, and so there is a big challenge there. And I think it's an area where you have also a very important interplay with regulations, with multiple regulations coming into it, and actually also for artificial intelligence. Some of the new cancer vaccines are really building sort of personalized treatments on the basis of large artificial intelligence models. And so you sit with innovation at the interplay or the intersection of many different regulatory frameworks. Real-world data, artificial intelligence, digital twins. I know there's a whole session on this afternoon. How do we innovate around the Europe's health data? How do we get high-quality data? How do we make sure that we can work in that space in a trustful way and with the legitimacy of all the actors? We talked about the regulatory, the clinical trial ecosystem, but I'd like to highlight two areas which I think are really important. I'll come back to them. So one is European Innovation Network. So how do we actually bring together all of the different clusters? We talked about the Kraków cluster today. We can talk about was in Lithuania and the strong CRISPR cluster in Vilnius. If you travel around Europe, there are many of these very, very strong innovation environments. And how do we make the most of these innovation environments? I think is a really, how can we sort of accelerate these innovation environments? And then finally, and I put it at the bottom because I think it really underpins everything, is the implementation into the healthcare systems. How do we work with challenged, cash-strapped and sort of healthcare systems that are coming under increasing pressure to actually see that innovations are being rolled out in practice? I think that's a really important and quite difficult problem to address. So if we look at these, if we call them enablers, if we look at these enablers, I think we can start to see some common themes that cut across them, and I think this is sort of heading towards the success factors, perhaps. And so it's one of the things that you look at is that if you look at all of these areas, they are dependent on scientific excellence. So we won't make progress in ATMPs, in advanced cell therapies, without excellent science. Artificial intelligence is really at the bleeding edge of science. But actually, to make real progress, you will need some sort of interdisciplinary collaboration, because there is no way you can scale this to significant impact on health without a collaboration with different disciplines and probably across borders in Europe. And so that brings me to the second point, which I think is the really critical thing to focus on, is that if you want to do something at scale in Europe, if you want to build a large data pool, a large cohort, if you want to run a large clinical trial, if you want to run a large collaborative research project, you need to cross borders. And crossing borders is difficult. And so I think the key question, one of the key questions for life sciences in Europe, if we want to be competitive, is really how do we turn this challenge into a competitive advantage? Because if we find ways to be effectively collaborating across national borders, then it's also easy for Europe to collaborate outside Europe with other countries. And I think we see that in Horizon Europe. There are many non-European countries that want to work with us. I think Canada is probably the latest example. But really, to achieve scale, we need to find a way of sort of moving across this cross-border collaboration and turn that into a competitive advantage for collaborations. I think the third area where we see an interplay between these is really the interplay between the regulatory landscape, the science, and the public trust. So how are we going to make progress in artificial intelligence? Well, clearly we have the AI Act and the requirements on AI. There is regulations around the data that underpins the AI model. There is a bleeding edge science component to artificial intelligence or virtual digital twins. But there is also fundamentally a question of trust. Will people trust the sort of algorithmic decision making? How do you put algorithmic decision making under professional or democratic control? And I think that's a key question in the health system. So there is an interplay here between regulatory questions and the science that we're making. And I think that's perhaps an area where we've done science without really thinking about the regulation. And many scientists are a little bit foreign to the regulatory landscape. And so perhaps that's an education part that we need to build in to the science training and to our projects going forward. And then I think that the last part, if we want to make true progress, it's about collaboration, partnerships beyond the lab. So how do you connect not only the organization, but really the capabilities from these different organizations, from research, from regulators, from civil society, patient organizations, and from industry? They all have different strengths. I think we see that in our projects. So for instance, if we look at our medical technology sector, of course our industry partners have unparalleled engineering capabilities. There is no way you can do advanced imaging or advanced radiotherapy without the engineering capabilities of those companies if you want to do innovation. But likewise, you need the experience and the knowledge from the science base to actually know what to do. And I think that's where we start to see very, very productive collaborations. And so I'll try to illustrate some of these points with some examples. And I think the first point I really want to make, and I think this is really important, is that excellence and collaboration are not opposing forces. And so I'll use data from IHI here, but really I think this holds true for any of our partnerships. So it's just that I happen to sit on this data. But if we look at the citations of the papers being published under the IMI and IHI programs, what we see is that the papers that are cross-sectorial or cross-institutional or international are significantly more cited than the papers that are done with a single institution or within a single country. And so I think the way I read this is that however you slice collaboration, collaboration produces papers that on average are more interesting and impactful in their field, at least in our program. And so I think we really need to remember this, that there is not an opposing force between excellence in science and broad collaboration. It's really a question of how do you execute and drive the projects. I think the other thing, and I'll dwell on publication metrics, again, not because I think bibliography metrics are the most important thing in science, but they are a very good snapshot of what's happening. And the other thing that we're seeing, and again, this is IMI data, I think this is true for probably all the partnerships and all the collaborative research, but they really are very good at connecting European life science hubs. And so they work to strengthen the research ecosystem. And I illustrate this with Amsterdam. It's alphabetically very early in the list, so that's the inclusion criteria here. But what we do see is that we have co-publication networks between a lot of strong European research hubs. And of course, the bigger hubs are much more visible. But the broader point here, I think, is that the key point is that there are very few, if any, centers in Europe that can host all the capabilities we need for progress. And so if we want to be world leading, we need to make sure that we bring together the capabilities and skills from different areas, different regions, and different parts of Europe. And so for me, that I think this is what we see in the collaborative projects. We manage to connect people across these different hubs and really bring sort of global level impact. And we see that because there is lots of collaborations, for instance, with the other Cambridge on the other side of the Atlantic in our publications. But the reason why I think this is important is that there is a lot of literature on this, patent literature and other, that shows that knowledge spillovers are quite local or regional. So the benefit of strong science comes often in the region where the science center is. And it's quite obvious. The companies benefit from the people coming out of the universities. The patient benefits from the strong clinical trial centers. And so we can't have one big center in Europe because people live everywhere. We do need to make sure that we have strength distributed over Europe to be able to benefit the whole of society. I'll switch gears. So this was a bit about sort of the need for collaborative research, but actually another aspect of collaborative research is that when you align and start to bring together people from different sectors, from industry, from research, from civil society, it's not only that you do things differently, but you can actually do different things. And I think this is from one of our projects, an Alzheimer project, and I think it's a really good illustration of why patient inclusion and participatory research really can drive progress. So what they did here was to look at smart homes and use of smart homes to predict early onset dementia. But if you think a moment about what are the experiments, what is the data they're collecting here? So they have devices in people's homes that are essentially doing everyday and night surveillance of individuals. When you come up in the middle of the night to get a glass of water, if you're putting on a cup of tea in your pajama in the morning, there are devices in your kitchen that monitors your behavior. So that's, I mean, it's hard to think about a more intrusive research project than that. You're literally in people's home, in their private life, and measure what they're doing. And actually, this worked really well. And I think the reason why this worked really well is that we had the patient organizations, so the Alzheimer Europe and their national centers, deeply involved, not only as an advisory body, but really involved in the data collection, looking at the data collection solutions, engaging throughout the data collection, the problem solving, and advice on data use and impact. And so the end result is that you can actually use these type of devices to understand early onset dementia. You can use them very effectively in sort of home care. But you wouldn't be able to do that research without these multi-party participatory collaborations. So I think that's the other, another message I want to send into the panels, is that if you do have broad collaborative coalitions, it's not only that you do things differently, but you can actually do different things. There is science that you can do that you couldn't do otherwise. And I mean, another good example of this is, of course, data. And I think this is where the partnerships really shine as sort of a neutral broker in the whole ecosystem. So if we think forward to the European health data space, what we want, and I think that was the Draghi report, we hear it in a lot of conversations, is that we want to use this for innovation. And it makes sense. If we can collect, say, the data on knee replacement surgery, of course, we should be able to use sort of Europe's knee replacement surgery to make better knee prosthetics and advance the use for patients. But if you start to use health data for innovation, I think there needs to be some sort of democratic oversight. And I think this sort of multi-party collaboration, public-private partnerships are a really good framework to provide that transparency and trust. And I think it's really, there are three things that we need to think about. So one is legitimacy. So actually, do we have the right to process the data? And what is the oversight and what is the right of individuals? The second is trust. And so if we get legitimacy and trust right, then we can start to have innovation around that data. But we really need to get both the legitimacy and the trust of data use right. I think the second, which I think is really interesting here, so this is, again, comes from one of our projects, but again, I'm not trying to be parochial, but we had a project that looked at SMEs, and actually part of the project, they were certifying SMEs in data curation and data quality. And so essentially, the small companies were coming in under contracts and curating data sources and making them available for real-world data, real-world evidence. And actually, the end result is that we have a large cohort of companies that are certified, quality labeled, with a uniform methodology that now can work as contractors under the Darwin EU system. And so if we do these projects right, we also create business opportunities for companies. And so it's not only being beneficiary in projects, you can actually use projects to almost seed and create a market. The other area where I think the partnerships as neutral brokers are really important is around regulatory science. So if you do regulatory science, if you work with regulators, you of course have an inherent conflict of interest, because you have the policymakers, the lawmakers, you have the regulators, and then you have the group that is being regulated. And so it's very difficult for industry and regulators to work together and understand what is the science we need to do today to effectively look for if tomorrow's products are safe and efficacious. But that's one of the roles you can take in these multilateral partnerships because of the transparency and the sort of legitimacy of an open platform, is that you can be a neutral broker and try to advance. And I think that if we do this right, this can be a real competitive advantage, not only for European industry, but actually for European society, because you have an oversight and a conversation about not only what do we want to achieve with the regulation, but how do we implement that. And I think we have some really nice examples. I think there are lots of good examples from other projects where with the discussions of, for instance, in our regulatory science summit that is now being executed, and Irene mentioned the regulatory sandboxes this morning. So that's one of these areas where we're trying to advance things in this participatory and working as a neutral broker. And then the last example I want to bring in, and I think Maciej in the previous panel, I think illustrated that really well, is actually, it's not only public-private, but it's also philanthropic. And so the role of civil society organizations. And this is an example of a long partnership IHI have had with Type 1 Diabetes Foundation called Breakthrough T1D. They also have an umbrella of other sort of sister organizations. But actually what these partnerships do is that they allow you to tap into that community. And we heard in diabetes the importance and the strength of the patient community and how they have helped to really progress the way diabetes is being managed. What these organizations allow you to do as a European partnership is actually really directly connect with that community, because they bring the patients, they bring the families, but they also bring often a sort of a community of researchers and advocates that come with them, and so you get the strength of that community. And for in this partnership, we've been looking at things like how can you set up clinical trial networks, how can you execute clinical trials, how can you contribute to national screening programs, how can you start to develop European master protocols. And I think one of this is a real success story, I think, for Europe, because it's not only IHI, I think, but there is a lot of European funding in these networks, also from the sort of Cluster 1 part of the Horizon program, where these cell therapies and islet transplants have been advanced into standard of care of Europe. And one of the effects of that is essentially that the large pivotal clinical trials in the world were executed in Europe simply because the networks, the trial sites, and the standard of care was here, so they could actually come to Europe and do the research. So then, in the last 2-3 minutes, so what should we focus on? So I hope I've convinced you that if we, to make real progress, we need to align public research, but we also need to bring in civil society actors, patients, philanthropic organizations, other actors, healthcare, the healthcare sector, together with the capabilities of industry, and really try to align them. And I think these partnerships, and I think if we talk about success factors, it's about mobilizing investment from industry, philanthropic and public funders towards these challenges. But it's more than money. It's actually the capabilities, it's the skills, it's the people. And so it's about mobilizing the skills from the private sector and the private sector innovation capabilities towards these key societal challenges. That's, I think, equally, if not more important than money. It is about connecting European life science hubs. As I said, I think we all know that there is a beneficial effect of being close to a strong science center for society. And so we need and we have a responsibility to make sure that that flourishes in many places across the whole of EU. And I think actually if we go back to this morning, that's one of the big take-home messages for me from the Letta report. It's not only the freedom to move, but it's also the right to stay, that we need to make sure that the whole of EU is flourishing. And then, and I think you would expect me to say that, but I think we can really address these drivers of European competitiveness by aligning public, private, civil society stakeholders around common solutions, but importantly, align the capabilities of public, private, and civil society actors, because ultimately this is about people. It's not only about money, it is about people. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, as I said before, we are starting this a little bit complicated structure in our agenda. So it's going to be 3 parallel sessions focused on identifying barriers that stand in the way of meaningful progress in health and life sciences, of course. But just a quick reminder, you're, of course, welcome to move between the 3 additional spaces we have for these panels, and if you would like to change the room, this is the proper time. Our team will help you. Of course, this is also the information for you guys in additional spaces on the 2nd floor. If you would like to change the place, please do this now. And let me introduce the titles, simply, not only the titles of the sessions and moderators who will guide these important conversations in 3 parallel sessions. So in this place, in this room, we are going to have a healthcare session. The session will explore how to overcome system-level challenges and build more resilient and people-centered healthcare. As Niklas said, people are the most important. Moderated by Nick Goldemont, CEO and founder of Medical Field Lab and professor of public health at Gdańsk Medical University and Leiden University Medical Center. You can take the stage right now, and in a moment we will invite the panelists. But let me introduce additional 2 discussion panelists. So biopharma, this session will focus on unlocking innovation in biotechnology and pharmaceuticals as well by identifying regulatory and market access challenges. And the moderator of this part of the event will be Magdalena Chlebus. I'm waving and I hope that you can see and hear me clearly. Magdalena Chlebus is Executive Director for Scientific and Regulatory Affairs at EFPIA. So greetings, Magdalena. And third room, MedTech and Digital Health. This is going to be a deep dive into how digital tools, in fact, and medical technologies can overcome fragmentation and accelerate innovation. And moderated, this part will be by Montse Daban. Hello, Montse. Thank you for being with us as well. In third room, upstairs on the 2nd floor, Montse is a Director of Strategic Foresight and International Relationships at BioCat. Oh my goodness, I did it. So the stage is yours. Yours stages are also yours and additional spaces, and we are closing the broadcast right now, so take the stage and invite your panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and congratulations. It's a really nice, elaborative introduction. Yeah, so welcome everybody. I'm Nick Goldemont, as introduced. So this session is about overcoming barriers to progress and what must change to achieve our goals. And also thank you very much, Nicholas, for the keynote. I think we know a lot already for many years on what we should do to improve innovation, development, and research, bring it to the community, and improve healthcare. But we have challenges, as I'm sure tomorrow was also very much discussed. I came in a little bit late. I had a night flight from Lisbon. I was at the International Integrated Care Conference, where we had a session on the use of diagnostics for providing person-centered care for diabetes patients. It was a session with Roche, so public-private partnership with the International Diabetes Federation. And it was a typical example where you saw the role of something like a device, AI algorithms, in the management of diabetes. But actually we also discussed, so a device, AI algorithms and data alone is not enough to achieve proper outcomes for patients. It's very much dependent on the whole process of care, which includes lifestyle aspects, the role of primary care, the collaboration between the family doctor, the diabetes nurse, the social worker, might be the personal context of the patient, of course the specialist, rehabilitation center, etc., a little bit depending on the needs of the patient. And if we only focusing on single solutions, the pills, the powders, the devices, the apps, or the data, we can't achieve better outcomes. We can't create potential cost savings for the systems to avoid complications. Increasingly and globally, this is a huge problem that our healthcare systems are not performing accordingly. We have wonderful science, for years, excellent science, we have wonderful solutions, but increasingly they're becoming unaffordable. Even in the Netherlands, innovative cancer therapies are in debate whether they are affordable for the future. And look at Central Eastern Europe, countries where I work a lot on improvement of care for patients with cancer and other chronic diseases and transformation of healthcare systems. It's affordability of proper care and also creating these outcomes which requires a sort of systems change is needed. So within this context, we have our research and innovation, which hopefully can translate into sustainable solutions, which create better outcomes, hopefully at a sort of lesser cost, or help produce a sort of gain of societies. So I was raised in this Dutch ecosystem of science, and Nicholas, I think nicely he described on what is needed. Wonderful examples from Amsterdam. I worked in Leiden, in Rotterdam, in Maastricht, in most of the university medical centers. I know also about the darker side of all these science collaboration and how much vested interest there are. The toxic competition among groups and not willing to share data. I did some work in brain cancer. Sharing of data among some of the professors and research group is really difficult because they are afraid for competition, their status, there are a lot of egos in the systems. There's even a phrase, a sort of, they call it the science mafia, a sort of group of people who are deciding, who are pulling the strings on where the money should go, who should do what, in Brussels, in the Netherlands, with the industry, etc. So I think we should also be not naive and be realistic and be honest to each other on how we can improve. So without further ado, I would like to invite our wonderful panel and that we have a really open and interesting debate. And I would like to ask Greet Vink from Erasmus Medical Center, Lucina Vucinak, please come forward, and Ramon Maspons from Catalonia from Barcelona in Catalonia, please. So the session is, so I'm gonna address this eloquent panel with, we have a fourth person. Sorry, I have here in my list. So, but you will introduce yourself in a moment. So I will ask two main questions, and I ask my colleagues to reflect on that. And then hopefully we have some questions for the room, that is really interactive. So may I ask the panel to introduce them shortly about who you are, your organization, and your role. Can I start here at the left-hand side with Lucina, please?
Hello, I'm Małgorzata Kosla, Baxter Research Foundation. You can just call me Gosia. My parents didn't give me a name that is very international. So Baxter Research Foundation, people say it is an NGO working as a biotech startup. I rather prefer to say that we are a patient-led global research collaboration, and each word in this is very important because it is very international and interdisciplinary project. And the motivation is my daughter. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 3 years ago, and back then there was one scientist working on the disease. Today there is more than 60 researchers in 8 countries, including European countries, of course, working on different treatment options from basic science, translational science, and clinical observations. We are part of Warsaw Health Innovation Hub at Medical Agency for Research in Poland, and I'm also a member of Rare Disease Council at Ministry of Health.
Thank you very much.
My name is Lucyna Woźniak. I'm currently Vice Rector for International Relations at the Medical University of Łódź. And few words maybe about the university, because it's quite specific for Poland that we educate only in 3 disciplines: medicine, pharmacy, and public health. However, we as the university are involved in several pan-European networks, including EIT Health. So it is a network dedicated to active life and healthy aging for the addressing to the aging population of Europe, and we are also the only Polish partner within reference sites of active and healthy aging in Europe, having the highest rank in this 4 stars. We are 4 stars partners. We are very proud of it. I'm saying about this because we try to build up our activity within Europe on the international collaboration as the university.
Thank you very much, Lucia. And Greet?
Yeah. My name is Greet Vink. I actually worked with, with you for a long time in Delft. I'm the director of the Research Development Office at the Erasmus Medical Center. We started 3 years ago with the Smart Health Tech Center, also at Erasmus MC. I'm also the director of that. And recently, I always start new things, sorry, but recently I also started a Women's Health Research and Innovation Center at the Erasmus MC with, of course, many colleagues. I'm not doing it alone. So, and Erasmus Medical Center, I think, is, well, one of the best, I think, one of the university hospitals that has most of the European projects. Until recently, because the University of Amsterdam merged with the Free University Hospital, so they are a little bit above us, but okay. Without the merge, they would be below us.
Thank you very much, Greet. And Ramon, please.
Yes, I am Ramon Maspons, Chief Health Innovation Strategist at Ministry of Health of Catalonia. And at the time, I'm sharing this position with the Chief Innovation Officer at Aquas, Health Technology Assessment Agency. I'm leading for the last 15 years, all related with public procurement of innovation strategy at the ministry, also leading some of the projects. And for the last 5 years, I'm leading the program from adoption of innovation from Catalan healthcare system.
Thank you so much. So we have a very nice, diverse panel. So we know that we have to step up, we have to do better. So the question is a little bit, what can we learn from the past? What are the good things we should keep and maybe strengthen? And what we should do different to make Europe stronger, more fairer, solutions more affordable, strengthen research, etc. So who wants to start?
Okay, let me start from the position of the university,
yes,
because it's very basic. As I said, our university is involved in several European initiatives because we decided that we can't operate as a separated organism and want to be involved in the major challenges that are in front of the European community. We were involved in the very beginning on the creation of the program, we are very proud of it, of the EIT Health. And we are from the very beginning active partners, and I must say that we are, I think, quite successful. But we have to remember that Poland is 27th in the rank of innovation on Innovation European Scoreboard. So there is plenty to do and plenty to eat, to learn and to digest in our ecosystem. So a few years ago, we decided to build up the strategy of the university of so-called knowledge triangle, involving education, innovation, and research combined together, because our practice just informed our practical approach to classical university education is not enough to create entrepreneurs and innovators. You have to put it from the very beginning into the students' programs. You have to involve it into the researchers' activity, and you have to create it in collaboration with external partners. These external partners were our colleagues, our partners from EIT Health, but also citizens from Łódź and from our region, and citizens and also local authorities. We wanted to, and we learned that doing it together, we can achieve much more. There is one more group that we involved in many of our projects from the very beginning. These were senior citizens of our city, where they were invited to co-create some projects from the very beginning. And it was extremely efficient because their opinion, their involvement sometimes changed our projects in quite spectacular way. So this is first. Collaboration with different stakeholders, with different partners, everyday collaboration to build trust. Because to work daily with different partners, you have really to build trust. You have really to build an ecosystem. Maybe quoting Manuel Castello, who is a very famous sociologist. We need people, we need network, and for network we need trust, and it's time consuming, and it's not something that comes from day to day. We have to remember that building trust is a long process, and we observe it within EIT Health, which has this year's 10th anniversary. And we are still learning about our partners. We are still building this network. So the question how to improve this activity is to build the sustainable network. And this is, I think, the most difficult at this stage.
What is required to make it sustainable?
Sorry?
What is required to make it sustainable, to build a sustainable network?
For this, you need a leadership, you need very good people. So people are extremely important. Human resources are crucial, but also, of course, funds that are required for this sustainable system. But I think that if you ask me to validate these different factors, I should say that people are crucial, and leadership within network is also very important to make consensus how to drive the platform or partnership.
If we look, for example, to Romania, to Bulgaria, maybe Moldova or Albania, so our potential partner in this. So how do you see that as building network? Is that?
Yeah, this is we are all discussing these days what is happening in the widening countries and how to use the potential of these countries, these emerging countries and emerging societies. I think it's very important to let them be involved in regular activity, not to build up separate ecosystems for them, but take them immediately into the major challenges, because we are losing time, and timing is very important. We have not talked too much today about how important it is to improve our efficacy by shortening these processes of integration, of improved collaboration, of involvement of different stakeholders, partners, countries, regions into the European research area. And for this, we have to be very efficient in building up legal regulations. We have to be efficient in giving real access to some data that we create. The best or the worst example is the system of biobanks in Europe, which are efficiently regulated, but it's so difficult to get access to biosamples if we are even, neighbors from the other university. And I'm very scared about this new platform, which is created by the citizens' health data, because again, the question is about regulations that will allow us accessing this data. From the point of view of researcher, I know how struggling, how painful is to get any data from my hospital, which is connected with the university. So this is about legal regulations. This is about mentality. This is about trust. This is about a complementarity of systems, etc., etc. And time, which is absolutely crucial factor.
Absolutely agree, and very useful lessons here. So maybe we keep a little bit in the Polish context. So your neighbor, so what is your reflection on this? How it works in the Polish context with the different organizations into sort of attempt to improve and strengthen infrastructures, collaborations?
So from what I observe definitely from the Polish perspective, as we are based in Warsaw, is that we need more, not only international cooperation, but more interdisciplinary cooperation. So what we observe locally, like we work with partners in US, with Oxford in UK, and in different European countries, but sometimes it was a challenge to connect organizations that are across the same street. Because one is in basic science and the other is in clinical research, and they don't talk to each other. And somehow, I can tell it from the patient organization perspective, sometimes I feel too much competitiveness between them, and it is also the place where patients can help, because bringing the patient in the center, you somehow, I believe, forget about the fights, about the KPIs for a while, because you are really focused on the patient. And I'm really glad that in the previous session it was said a lot about patient engagement, and I appreciate the fact that in Europe we talk about it in context of ethics, that we want to have a social impact, not only making money. That's great, but the truth is, and I'm also happy that Niklas showed it in the keynote, that patients can be the drivers for money as well, and for doing things, really. And if we all are aware that there is this valley of death for translational science, though it is very hard to take it from bench to bedside. And we have a lot of very great science in Poland, in entire Europe. And I wouldn't ever say that there are worse scientists in Europe than in US, from my experience. The thing is that you need not only to have somebody in the project from the very beginning who understands the regulatory landscape and is navigating from the very beginning what data is gathered, so it is useful in preclinical trials and later in clinical trials. So you need this person, and it may be a company, it may be a startup, it may be an NGO, also led by patients. But you also need tons of motivation. And I believe it is really appreciated that patients have this motivation to move things forward, they have the sense of urgency. So sometimes in my project, in 3 years we did as much. People say that in normal science you do it in 10-15 years. And it is because at some points we didn't wait that for a grant, but we invested 10,000 euros, for example, to have iPSCs and then differentiated neural cells. So we didn't wait for that. We worked on other areas to get a grant. So we can cross the bottlenecks because we have sense of urgency, and it is not just another project. It is we have a target, and it is curing the people. It is not the number of publications. It is not the not having a great name and recognizable. Like you said about the dark sides of the science, and we are aware of all of that because we met with that. Fortunately, we are able to work with people who are really open-minded and are for open science, and because of that, we can really move fast. And so my message, like in answering your question, from Polish perspective, we need more collaboration, definitely. Like I would say it is the biggest issue. Information flow, there are great information on the EU, initiatives on EU level, and we just don't know about it. Like we know because we want to be in these European structures, but people in Poland don't know very often what they can be part of. But across Europe, I see we need more patient engagement. We have great examples, like, for example, in rare diseases, Teleton, which developed gene therapy. But we have small organization, for example, now in Slovenia, that is just starting gene therapy in Slovenia, in EU, for their gene therapy. And we don't leverage that. We don't support this organization. And in US, they already do that. There is Trans-Zuckerberg initiative. There's much easier access to philanthropic capital. In Europe, entrepreneurs, they don't invest in science, and it is a huge problem from my perspective as well. So that's my point of view.
And maybe, so recently there was a tragic incident here in Kraków with a doctor who was murdered by a patient. And I also working in Poland, and had also issues more at the delivery side, at the provision of care and difficulties. So also, do you see there opportunities to team up with more the application side of innovation, improvement, accessibility, and had to make it as a whole much better, and a sort of synergy between university development, private industry, and what we can do with patients? Do you see there lessons or things we should do?
So, as we can see from the very morning, there are like, you can do something important in almost all areas, and definitely the application of discoveries is one of the topics. The accessibility of drugs in Poland is an issue because one thing is that EMA will register the drug, the other is whether the company will apply for the reimbursement in Poland and if the drug is accessible. So we have, it is the huge issue, for example, and also the application in clinical setup is an issue. And this example with the patient, I think that there's a lot about empathy and communication, and it is the same in science. The examples that I gave you, that people across the street cannot talk to each other, it is also about communication. And I believe that nowadays, with all AI tools and the fact that we don't have to memorize everything anymore, maybe we should have more space in educational programs for researchers, for clinicians, for everyone, for soft skills, for meeting real patients during the studies and talking to them. And there is no reason why the person who will work with vials in the laboratory shouldn't talk to the patient. And it is still happening. People are working 20 years in the lab and not seeing the patient they are working for. So how it may work? So that's something that should change, and then maybe the incidents like recently in Kraków wouldn't happen because there will be more understanding on the both sides, and there are not different sides.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Great. What is your take on the lessons learned and how to overcome typical barriers for ambitions?
I think that what we learned is that we can cooperate via European programs. We can cooperate across Europe, which I think is a great asset, but it needs still improvement. What I think is, and I wouldn't say that that's wrong, but it's something we should improve, is communicate. We should communicate better. And I give this example because, for example, I'm running the Smart Health Tech Center, so we are dealing with companies, SMEs, startup companies, also larger companies, on certain innovations. And it's so technology driven, it's so technology pushed that, you know, it doesn't fit the system. And it takes a lot of talking to convince those people that nobody in the end is going to buy it. I mean, if you don't work in co-creation with patients, with doctors, nurses, extremely important, because they are often doing the actual work, people in the lab, involve them all, it's not going to work. So I always said to them, well, I don't know how you want to earn your money, but this is not going to give you any income later on if you work like this. The other thing is, also the mistake is made on the hospital side. Doctors and nurses don't communicate very well either, because they know what the problems are, they know what the problems are with their patients, and articulating that very good, it also helps companies to come up with the right products. So one way or the other, everybody is doing his thing in his own silo, and then people want us to buy things. And those things all end up somewhere in the closet because it doesn't work, which is a complete waste of money. So it's better to do it in co-creation. Maybe it takes a little bit more time, but then you have people that are going to buy it and you have people that are going to use it. And I think that's something that in any new program should be integrated. It's not that, oh yes, you should have a patient federation and you should have a company and then of course a university hospital. That's not the solution. I think you have from start have to convince, or at least a financial organization has to put something in to force people to communicate and co-create from start. They start now co-creating when they're given the ground, which is too late.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much. So, Erasmus Medical Center, it's, I know it quite well, and it's almost a sort of cathedral of excellent science, technology. It's a huge building. It's like a cathedral, really. People are really impressed if they
20,000 people are working there, and we see over, I think, 100,000 patients per year. So
exactly, a turnover of 2 billion, I remember. So, but
which is not really an income we have to invest immediately.
Yeah, no, sure.
Paying off the hospital, for example.
But so I remember at the time, it was very, very, let's say, excellence, very
driven, yep.
Specialist, hyper-specialist driven. So how do you make this happen in such an environment where everybody's so focusing on publications and doing their little bit in this complex world? So how do you how do you support people into reaching out into communities?
Well, I think the good thing also about the European Commission is that everything got impact driven, which of course publications are important, but they are not the most important thing, which also changed the way people are evaluated nowadays in our hospital, because we take a look whether they make impact as well. And they have to show that they make impact, which is a big difference from the past. I'm working there now for 10 years, and in the last 5 years we have impact as a very crucial criterion for making a career. Doesn't mean that happens overnight. We have silos. And even if you are a doctor, it doesn't mean, like you said, that you understand your patient and your patient's problem. And so there we still have a long way to go. And then, of course, we also have more fundamental scientific departments. So now we try to connect them and work on certain problem areas. And then you discover that they have a lot in common and that they can actually help each other solving problems. But it doesn't mean that you have to cut down the silos. That's the whole thing. You have to work transdisciplinary.
Yeah, as already mentioned, should we facilitate that also more from a policy perspective and a European perspective?
Yeah, I think that would be a very good idea. And that makes that we should actually start working problem-driven. Articulate very clearly what the problem are and don't mention, oh yeah, yes, we have a health workforce problem. Yes, we know. But behind that problem, what is the real problem? And the real problem is that, for example, I have been more or less shadowing a lot of doctors and nurses in my hospital because I'm not a doctor, I'm not trained, I'm a simple biologist by training and a geographer. So, but I shadowed them. So I walked around for a whole day, sometimes days, that department, that nurses, doctors. I discovered, and of course, I'm not in the profession, so I asked very awkward questions. I said, why are you doing this in this way? I mean, you're walking up and down to get all kinds of materials, leaving the patient alone with all the risks. So maybe we should have some innovation. So now we are working on a robot car that parks itself in front of the patient's room. The patient stays, of course, not unattended. And we don't waste all the materials, you know, for example, when they have wounds. You have so many materials you can use. I didn't know. There are 60 type of different things.
Yeah.
So how to choose the right one? And if it has been in the room and it's not the right one, you have to throw it away. So with the robot car, which also more or less calculates whether there's still enough in, you know, you save time, you help the patient, you reduce the cost, and you're greening.
That's a very nice example, and I was reminded of the time. So, Ramon, coming back to you, and you already, in your introduction, you mentioned procurement. So, besides the different topics already discussed, partly it's a barrier is adaptation, access, and also procurement in this respect play a role. So could you elaborate a little bit your view on this sort of barriers? How can we improve market access, adaptation, and for example, how can procurement work in this?
Okay, I like to give you some facts and figures, 3 facts and figures related with all of this. According FDA, 22,000 pre-market submissions are made per year. 22,000. According to FDA, fewer than 9% of these products achieve implementation. Fewer than 9%. It means between 7 and 9%. Does it mean that, according to FDA, 20,000 pre-market submissions never achieve the market per year? 20,000 pre-market submissions. According PricewaterhouseCoopers, survey 2020, fewer than 25% of the R&D grant results get commercialized in Europe. Fewer than 25% of R&D grant results. And according to also this survey, more than 50% of public contracts do not achieve their goals. More than 50%. So, getting all this and mixing all this information, it's quite clear that we have a clear problem of adoption of innovation. Not of generating innovation, but of adopting innovation. And the main problem related with adoption of innovation is, first of all, to support the system readiness to adopt innovation, and at the time to support adaptability and maturity, the alignment and maturity of innovations to address system needs. But who is defining system needs? Companies, patients, healthcare providers, payers? First point to solve, who is defining system needs? Maybe a mixed system, bottom-up, using healthcare providers, patients, top-down, using payers and policymakers. First point to solve. Second point to solve is like a perfect storm. Never before so much innovation in companies' portfolio, but at the time, never before so little money in public sector for procuring this innovation. And unfortunately, this situation will go on in the next years. With AI, with 3D, it's impossible to adopt all these innovative solutions. And the big problem with adoption is reimbursement. Unfortunately, most of us are familiar with TRLs, technology readiness level, but few of us are familiar with ARL, adoption readiness level. In each stage of TRL, it exists an ARL, but nobody is taking care of the ARL. Then what happens? Companies, entrepreneurs, spin-offs, researchers come with business models with no sense for the payer. Thinking AI. How do we can procure an AI solution? We can procure as a good, as a service, maybe with a risk-sharing agreement, risk-sharing risk-sharing financial based in total cost, risk-sharing outcome-based, outcome guarantee, outcome condition to evidence generation, gain sharing according to savings after delivering the service. Companies not always are prepared for all this reimbursement management, and they don't take care of all of this when they begin the projects.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that this domain of reimbursement, financing, procurement procedures, etc., should we do something in order to provide better support and knowledge to organizations? Like in Spain, you have different regions working with procurement, organization reimbursement models. Is this something also from a European perspective where we have to step up and reach out not to the obvious, let's say, players who typically applying for these sort of programs and support, but also to, well, other countries? What is your reading on this?
I agree with my colleague that all of these have to be taken care in the earlier stages of the research activities. What need are the projects solving? And very often it's extremely difficult to find the right definition of the need. We used to play, we use sometimes to play a game with physicians, nurses, trying to identify trying to find the right definition of need. I want this. No, this is not the right definition. I need. I want a Da Vinci. I want a robot. No. We need to improve safety at operating room. We need to improve precision at operating room. It's quite different, because maybe then robot is not the solution.
Yeah.
Can I add something?
It takes eight hours more, I think, the operation with the Da Vinci.
Yeah.
Although it is far much better for the patient, because the patient can go home earlier. So we save in the bedtime 2 days.
Yeah.
But we need maybe 2 surgeons, 8 hours of staff for an operation. So that's... and are we worth to pay for that?
Yeah, that's true. And it shows a little bit the complexity and delicacy on how to decide where to invest. The development, the whole chain we need in order to get it to the patient. So we're running a little bit out of time. So we have to wrap up a little bit. So we had one extra speaker than planned. So, but this was very valuable, very important insights. So for the wrap up, we have a wrap up meeting tomorrow morning. So I won't summarize the whole discussion, but I think there are various key elements which I think are very useful for our ambition to improve the impact of life sciences for better person-centered care at lower cost and better outcomes. So for this, we have to thank you for your contribution, and please an applause for our panel. Thank you so much. And we continue to the next part.
Yes, thank you so much. Right now we are coming back here to the next part in the agenda. And once again, there will be Kazimierz Murzyn with the interview with our, I can repeat it, I suppose, visionary CEO. Visionary CEO, we will see. Bogusław Sieczkowski, CEO of Solvita. This interview will be broadcasted to your rooms as well, and it will be held in here in the main room downstairs. So, in this conversation, we will hear from Bogusław Sieczkowski, CEO of Solvita, who is already with us, about how leaders in biopharma are breaking through the toughest barriers to innovation in healthcare. So the stage is yours. Please, Kazimierz, let's interview.
We want to make sure that our guests also sitting in 2 other rooms are with us. Can you confirm somehow? Can you knock the head or something like that?
Can you see?
We don't know. We have to go, yeah?
So there is we should go, we need to.
But there is transmission. So,
yes.
So, okay, so we are heard. Okay, hello. Again, the fireside chat with Bogusław Sieczkowski. Again, visionary, I believe, entrepreneur, but we are not going to talk about the visions this time, more about the problems. But at the beginning, tell us about yourself. I mean, who you are, and what kind of organization you are representing here.
Thank you, Kazimierz, for having me. Solvita, it's over 1,000 scientists and specialist company, preclinical contract research organization located...
Excuse me, Lucyna, can I ask you?
Company is located, our laboratories are here in Kraków, Poznań, but not only in Poland, also in Croatia, and sales and scientists sitting also in the US, UK, and across the whole Europe. Our mission is simply to accelerate the access to new therapies. We want to help other pharma biotech companies to deliver new therapies faster to the market. And the company was established in 2007 here in Kraków, together with my friend Paweł Przewidzinkowski. We both just decided that that's the best spot for this type of company here in Central Europe, in Kraków, as a renowned scientific cluster. And that's already almost 18 years of us. We've been operating not only from here.
Actually, that's not really true, because at that time, Klaster was not renowned yet.
Yes, I was referring to Kraków, sorry.
Okay, which means over close to 2 decades you are running this company.
That's true.
We may have, we may say, with some kind of success, because the company is growing. It's actually prospering now, but not without difficulties. yeah, over time. And now let's talk about these difficulties, about these troubles you met, you overcome, you fight it as a leader of this organization, one of two leaders, of course, but you've been involved in this very strongly. So, question is, what were your personal strategies to overcome the difficulties, the barriers, problems created by the system you are operating in through this time? Maybe how many times did you pivot as startups are doing this, or you didn't? You continued the strategic path and you've survived somehow?
Yes, of course, we've been continuing for years and still striking with many obstacles. And as we established Cellvita, we had to deal with many barriers, not only with regulatory, but also, especially at the beginning, the access to science, financing, infrastructure. But once Cellvita was growing, maturing, got the momentum, we had to encounter more and more these regulatory barriers. The main solution for that was always to gather enough of expertise, enough of competencies to be able to deal with them. And at Cellvita, we have specialists, or we contract services to be able to deal with all of this regulatory stuff, the grant financing, the ESG, or everything what is needed also for listed companies. And that all together creates a huge part of our overhead, which simply lowers significantly our profitability. And unfortunately, European Union is hugely over-regulated here, much more than the US. And in spite of all of this harmonization, we still need to be double audited or double checked by FDA, for example.
But you are not actually going to complain about regulations, over-regulations now. We heard this today and weeks ago, for the weeks many times. So it's not. We know that's the issue is, or the problem is, the question to you. Were there some kind of sudden changes, something unexpected that really threatened your development to slow down? Did you encounter something which kind of surprised you over the time during your development?
Absolutely. Maybe starting from the very recent surprise, the ESG regulations. Yeah. Can we imagine that European large pharma companies, of course, require from European service providers to comply with all of these green goals, zero emission goals, and so on. But on the other hand, they expect that our pricing will be comparable with Asian service providers. So where is the logic? How we can survive it? That's still an open question mark. Maybe another case, just to give something positive, referring to JCI, where we are located and still Cellvita is operating. That's GMP certified microbiology services. That's a tiny, small, but crucial part of our complex quality services for ready pharma products. And that's simply a business line of Cellvita services, which has been growing for years. And our clients, we had to subcontract it simply. And our clients started to insist on us to take it, to organize it in-house. They perceived it simply as an unnecessary risk. And our idea was simply to organize this lab, certify it, and that's it. And can you imagine that not the capex, this few million zloty, was our biggest problem we encountered? Simply the certification over a year to certified lab for GMP purposes. What was our solution? Finally, we decided to acquire an asset, the certified lab. And that was done a year ago. That was also one of the factors why now in Cellvita Group we have also POS Lab. But unfortunately, the negotiations took over a year, and finally, anyway, we lost a year only because of some unnecessary burden. I mean, instead of 2-3 months, it usually takes over a year. Why? Because we are organized this way. European Union.
So this is the case in which we may say that there is a kind of obstacle which you turned anyway into the success because you acquired
Finally, we are anyway happy because we have not only certified laboratory at this entity, but also many other additional business lines, and that was finally a win-win situation because Servita simply expanded, and now we have additional team of over 80 people working in Poznań.
Okay, but what it took to make this decision, because this was kind of a bold decision. Either we wait yet another 3 months, maybe 6, maybe yet another year.
We wanted to save a year because the adaptation at GCI together with this certification was supposed to take over 2 years. And we hope that we will save at least a year by buying an asset, by acquiring a company. And finally, anyway, we lost because the negotiation had prolonged. But okay, we have an additional company. That's for me, that's a pure example how creative you have to be if you want to overcome some burdens, some regulatory burdens on which you cannot influence. You cannot speed up this.
But you kind of confirm the famous sayings that if something doesn't kill you, it will strengthen you.
That's at least in this case, yes.
But I believe still this is not the way. This is not the strategic way to develop the business, to bet on.
Absolutely. But you need to be creative, and you need to be ready to encounter when you encounter such things, not to just stay and wait, but keep going. And if you cannot solve it, try to skirt around. Go another way.
So I learned actually in working in Poland as a consultant that a lot of companies actually learn how to avoid problems than to solve. But this is not the case, I believe.
Absolutely not, because regarding the regulatory area, usually these are certain rules set, and you need to comply. There is no way we are even not allowed to think how not to comply with them. We need to solve it somehow.
From the previous discussions, I made a note. I believe for me, it's a quite important note that some kind of conclusions from people sitting here and discussing that it's actually our problem is not the regulatory. But we shouldn't be afraid of regulations. Regulations are extremely necessary. That's the kind of good point in our our environment. But we should be actually be afraid of the fragmentation. And does it matter in this case? Did you notice the fragmentation of activities?
Yes, we see it. Especially now, taking into account the recent months and taking into account what is happening in the world, how the new world order is setting up. And from my recent visit to Asia, when I was talking with CEOs of Asian pharma companies, they are more and more interested in a European market and are asking about services through which they could enter to Europe. But they are terrified how divided we are and how different are the regulations in each country. In spite of the same science, the one EMA organization, but still there is a lot of unnecessary obstacles.
But can you observe some kind of fragmentation, not only because we are 27 countries, but across other dimensions?
Yes, I agree with what was said on the previous panel regarding, for example, this biobanking case. There are separate institutions, and can you imagine that we are cheering up at Servita when we are signing the agreement with another one hospital to be able to biobank the tumor samples, and there is no system solution and access to each institutions in parallel. When we have a need for certain specimen, for certain sample, we are not doing it for fun, but for our clients who are simply working on the new drugs. And why we need to tackle all of these problems and wait months and organize our own network of collaborations of all of these logistics just to be able to access to another type of samples.
So could you provide one or maybe two definition of key success factor that you think we should focus on in order to progress faster? When we are talking about solving some kind of critical problems, barriers in Europe. Or you can start with Poland, of course, but
that will be difficult to suggest only one solution for the whole systemic problems. I can only speak from my perspective of a company or from entrepreneur perspective. We are simply keeping a kind of a challenger attitude. We need to survive somehow around it and keep open-minded and constantly work on new solutions just to be able to keep going and develop the company.
I was kind of guessing because I thought that you will kind of refer to the human factor, I mean to people as a key success factor, because the problems you have solved, the pivot you have made were done because you do have great people in the company.
That's true. That's always behind each company there are people. At least up to now, I don't know how it will be in future, but I believe still people are the main asset of each company. The more science, the more high tech in company, the more we need to rely on people, no matter what kind of technologies we have behind.
And do you have, or you don't have the problem with access to those people now? And over time, how it went?
But honestly, we believe that we are in a very good spot, in a very good place, location, being here in Central Europe, where not many other commercial the typical CROs, especially preclinical CROs companies are located. Vast pool of scientists who not necessarily want to stay in basic science or work at hospitals. There is a huge group of people who are ready to work in companies like Cellvita, and that's one of our best advantage. Why? Because we are able to take the best of the best who are absolutely comparable with Boston, Cambridge scientists. That's one of our advantage.
Okay, that's something positive at the end of our talk. Thank you. We are a little bit over the time, but we have to give the floor to others on the floor, on the second floor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, we need to give a floor to the second floor. This is called Inception. Thank you. Let's take a deep breath. You don't need to do anything with this kindness. Thank you so much. So, yes, we are ready to dive into and jump even to next part of the conference and to remind that this interview was held by Kazimierz Murzyn and interviewed was Bogusław Sieczkowski, CEO of Cellvita. But right now we return to 3 parallel sessions, each dedicated to crucial and very timely question: how do we define success in health innovation and how we can measure it effectively? And once again, we will have the same moderators, so my speech will be a little bit shorter than previously. So please, healthcare in here, welcome Nick Goldemon once again. Please join me. The biopharma, Magdalena Chlebus, once again, thank you for being with us with this previous session and good luck with the next one. And exactly, we wish the same to MedTech and Digital Health session. And greetings for Montse Daban. This is the third space. And please welcome panelists in each room. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's working. Yes, please come down, take a seat. Panelist is Martin Pergens, Natalia Haraskiewicz, yeah, and Igna Lipska, and I think we have also Kasia again. So we have 4 panelists. Welcome, please. A warm welcome. Yes, so in the last session, we discussed a little bit on how to overcome barriers towards more progress in EU life sciences. And also this morning, the US was mentioned, where a lot of high-quality research and innovation is done, a lot of funding and investments available for companies, for universities, hopefully also for the future. But if you look to healthcare systems, actually the US is performing really, really bad. From the development, from the developed countries, the US is the most expensive healthcare system in the world. The outcomes are really bad, far below what we are performing in Europe. And about 50% of US citizens don't have even access to the most basic healthcare, like a family doctor, let alone innovative treatments. So there is something, if we look to innovation, especially in healthcare, how it eventually translates into solutions for people. And that's also sometimes where I try to get my head around on if we do wonderful on this or that, or maybe less, how does it relate to practice? So I hope we can reflect a little bit in this panel. So before we go into the questions, I would kindly ask to tell something about yourself, about your organization, your role. So can I start with the left-hand side, please?
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here, especially I will be in Warsaw next week, so I will be able to compare. And I'm sure that, well, for what I've seen. Anyway, I am representing the Transform Alliance, which is a consortium of the stakeholders, the researchers, the clinicians, the patient groups, and the industry. So it's really about collaboration, and this allows us to procure some policy pieces where we have asks and also solutions that we want to provide. And our mission is really to allow a timely access and a sustainable access to medicine and especially ATMPs, advanced therapies. In addition to that, I'm the president of IPOPI, the International Patient Organization for Primary Immune Deficiency, a range of 550 different conditions, rare conditions, so I have also the rare angle in my daily life, I would say.
Merci beaucoup, Martine. Okay, Kasia, please.
Małgorzata Kośla, Baxter Research Foundation, this patient-led research initiative, also international and interdisciplinary.
Natalia Hraszkiewicz-Birkemeyer. I have over 20 years of experience within public and private healthcare systems and innovation ecosystems. 4 years ago, I assumed my role to be a scientific advisor for the European Commission. And since then, I have been involved in various legislative and non-legislative instruments and initiatives. For example, the Health Technology Assessment Regulation, the Startup and Scale-Up Strategy, the Critical Medicines Act, and recently also the LifeScience strategy for the European Union.
Thank you very much, Natalia.
Monika Ślęzak. I am the coordinator of the Industry Contact Point MedTech and Health. We are located in Warsaw in Wrocław, at the Łukasiewicz Research Network Polish Center for Technology Development. And I'm here since, like PORT itself has in its core activities life science. This is one development and also interaction with patients, what was mentioned today several times. We would like to try to find this direct way to the patients to that the life science innovations really find their solutions directly at the patient side. And as a coordinator of the industry contact points, we were involved in preparation, one of the workshops preparing for this event, asking the European projects about their key factors, but also bottlenecks regarding the synergies between European projects and how can we change it, also with the life science strategy, to make this healthcare more accessible and equitable to all European patients.
Thank you so much. And that's basically the key question which I would like to ask. So that is what can we learn if we look back from looking at KPIs, doing measurements on factors related to performance, impact, innovation, scoreboards, etc. So what can we learn from it? And what should we do different? What should we add, maybe, to measurement of frameworks and KPIs? Who wants to start?
I can start.
Okay.
So, in fact, as you know, we have various different indicators for various different purposes. So some indicators are on the systemic level. So, you know, they just, their function is to assess healthcare systems as a whole systems. Then we have the level of organizations or sectors. Then you use also, of course, different types of indicators. And then finally, there are indicators on the patient's level. So then it can relate, for example, to patients' well-being or to patients' feedback about certain therapies, patients-related outcomes measures, for example. Recently, or just almost 6 months ago, right, Poland assumed its presidency, and of course, dedicated to certain priorities. And these priorities are related, for example, to security, also in the context of the health care. The most important topics are, for example, the transition of healthcare towards more digital systems, and then availability and access of medicines across all member states. And of course, all these goals are also subject to appropriate measures and monitoring. So just to give an example of 2 types of indicators which are commonly used within the European Commission. We have the European Innovation Scoreboard, and you assess, for example, R&D investments, public investments, private investments, the amount of patents, publications which are co-authored with partners from another member state. And we have also indicators which typically relate to performance assessments of healthcare systems across Europe. So these indicators are known as the European Core Healthcare Indicators. And they assess, for example, healthcare systems across member states, disparities in therapies and treatments. They also evaluate socioeconomic conditions. And yeah, maybe I will stop here and give a chance for others.
Yeah, thank you very much, Natalia. So you gave a nice sort of a short overview of different indicators, different domains, and that now in the digital, we add some things on cybersecurity and safety, for example. So we assume that we collect these indicators, it provides us insights, probably with the idea to improve or do something different. We know something, okay, this is going well, this is going wrong, we should do something.
Can I
please,
go after what you said? Because actually when we ask our participants of our workshops, these were the coordinators of the Horizon Europe project, also in the field of the healthcare, medtech and biomed. So we had quite diverse group of scientists and project managers of the projects. Actually, they highlighted the inconsistency in the question of using the metrics, because actually what is measured very often within the European projects, it's not the outcome of the projects, but like outputs, yes? So number of the scientific publications, number of the patents that they produce. And the evaluators, despite the fact the evaluation process is getting more and more complex within the Horizon Europe projects, do not ask these questions related to the indexes that you mentioned. And we think that, at least that based on the opinion we received, that could be one of the areas to be discussed also in the context of the strategy to be implemented, how to measure it and to really apply the proper metrics for the projects that are funded. Because at the end, it should be long-term strategy that should be fulfilled by these projects. And what we see is like the very short approach. Sometimes it's like the one project phase, not looking further how to develop, exploit, and make the impact for the patients at the end.
So you advocate a sort of more long-term perspective on measurements and impact rather than only the output of the project itself.
Definitely.
Yeah, okay.
I am happy to bounce on that. I have another definition which is much simple, very simple, which is about having indicators on process or on results. And from the patient perspective, we like indicators on results, because what matters to us is not that we have nice innovation, but this is that they access the people who are there aimed at. And this is what we lack sometimes in two senses. First of all, we see quite many research programs where when you have done your article, you're done. But this is not enough. We like to wait for translational research. And the second thing is you succeed. For example, I have a very, it's painful to me. This is gene therapy for SCIDs. It's a kind of disease. It was developed in Europe. And nowadays, in my country and in many other countries, when we have a patient like that, we have to send him or her to the US to be treated, when it was developed in Europe. So this is something that it's really painful, first of all, to bear with, but also to understand how public money has been invested there, and then it's not sustainable in the EU for many reasons. And when it comes to targeted therapies or innovative therapies, we have really this problem. And this means that we also have to address a lot of things, and especially because I am in the rare disease field as well, the cross-border. And I like that you have indicators that consider a cooperation between countries. But the fact also that not every country is able to offer the facility to give the medicine. For example, if I go to transplant or gene therapy, not every country has the facility, so cross-border should be really improved. And indicators on that may be very interesting. This is still about access. So I think we have many, and the last thing I wanted to address is coverage. And because, of course, we have nice medicine emerging, but at the end of the day, the patient can't access because they are not covered. And recently, just to give an example, because we speak of the US, but I have one patient from one country from the EU who need a transplant. The country doesn't want to pay for that. So this is not possible in the country, so the patient should have to move in another country where there is a cost. So the patient country doesn't want to pay. And so we are asked, as a patient organization, should we go to this trial that we have seen in China, or what else? Should we advocate? This is the kind of question you are asked nowadays. And China, they are doing well, and not only. when we go to CAR T cells or things like that. This is really an even application within the different countries and within the different fields.
Yeah, Martin, so you describe a very practical, let's say, issue related to innovation and not the accessibility to innovation. So what would be the implications for indicators? Should we measure things differently and report so that we can learn from it? What is your idea about this issue?
Yeah, I think that the indicators maybe should be how an innovation goes to clinics. So that we have some kind of proof that the efforts that have been dispensed are effective on the ground and come to the patient and the physicians as well, because this is a burden for the physician as well, of course. Most of the time the physician come to us. So I think also this is really something that we need is about public and private cooperation, because we know that, well, from my knowledge at least, that the public is really good in innovation, but the private is very good in the access, because they work on that. So join the skills and the knowledge and the experiences would be something valuable from the money perspective, but also from the success. And we have other ideas, but I won't.
Yeah.
If I may build on that, I believe that private is very good in application because they are focused on application. And those are their indicators. And I strongly believe that it is not purely about the indicators, but what they cause. And it was not mentioned, but I'm not sure how it works in other European countries, but in Poland, those indicators mentioned are also the ground for the financing of the academia. So it is natural when I go, it happened many times, we wanted to start cooperation, and it was not the question about the impact on society, the question was about the number of publications we can generate with the project. And it should be kind of secondary indicator. Like, I'm not saying we should remove it because somehow we need to validate also the impact of the work for the scientific community. But the impact that current focus has, so the publication, the patents, everything what was mentioned for the academia is that we don't have really open science in Europe. And it is the huge struggle to really translate there is innovation into the application. And I will give you a very practical example. I recently started biotechnology studies in one of the top universities in Poland. And on the very first day of my studies, there was safety and intellectual property training. And the main message that I got with myself was that don't ever share your discovery unless you patent and you publish to anyone, to your colleague from your team. So if young students get this information already during their studies, how they can be open later when they do their work and if they want to cooperate with clinicians and so on. And it is really hard to overcome it. It is possible, and our example is that I want to believe they openly share the knowledge with each other. But it is something that requires building huge trust. The other thing with this indicators that I believe it is also kind of connected with the cultural things in Europe is that it creates a lot of hierarchy. And when we talk that our workforce is restricted, that we miss people in life science in Europe, and I can really see with my own eyes that when we have people in US, which are young researchers, they can run projects. In Europe, very often, you cannot do that. You need to have some mentorship of professor. And in one of my first trips to Boston, I've met Eric Minikal. I don't know if you know the story, but it is the guy in Broad Institute who 14 years ago just changed his career and started to studying biotechnology because his wife is in danger of prion disease. And after 14 years from just starting the studies, they have RNA therapy in clinical trials. And it is possible because in US they were able to get their own lab right after studies. In Europe, we have very talented young researchers. Young, I don't mean they just finished PhD. They are 5 years after with their PhD and so, and they cannot run their labs very often. So I believe that we also don't leverage the resources that we have and very smart people that are here.
That's a very interesting comment. So you indicate to this that indicators can and the related incentive can have adverse, perverse effects to behavior of organizations, researchers, etc. But also that we might look for other sort of characteristics which maybe can be used as an indicator. Young researchers.
So I won't be very original saying that I would look for, I don't know, number of clinical trials, maybe not necessarily the application in a context that the product is the patient, because clinical trials are difficult, and like I saw the statistics that 90% of them fail for many reasons. That's science, but definitely getting the innovation to the clinical trials should be kind of indicator. And there's actually, because you are asking also about the good examples in Europe, I think that for rare disease, actually, there is a very good example of the grant program. It is called Ardera. It is funded by European Commission, and it requires from the very beginning, from the consortium, that they have understanding of regulatory pathway and application, and that there is co-creation with patients as well. So you need to have, and also understanding of data management landscape. So everything that was mentioned today is required on the level of sharing the grant, simply, and I think it is the way how it should work, and they really require to show by the consortium that they know what they are doing in this wider perspective. And very often in the grant program, it is not required. And I think that somehow in this Ardera program, I see that they want to secure the application, and it is right way. Somehow they included the indicator of cooperation in the grant program, and it is kind of the indicator we should have in Europe to collaborate across countries and specializations.
Thank you very much. I come back to you, Martin. Natalia, you yes, already raised your hand in the...
Yeah, sure. Just coming back to your question, what could be improved, right? Or what could be, how certain indicators could be applied in a better way. So first of all, I would propose so-called SMART measures, where SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And it's especially important also in the case where we deal with long-term projects, strategic projects. Then I would propose also to apply staggered, so-called staggered indicators. And in this way, we can divide very ambitious goals, which look sometimes that seem to be not achievable, into smaller partial goals and targets, which become more achievable. And one example could be, for example, vaccination, right? Vaccination rates, where the very ambitious European Commission goals are to get 80–90% of eligible populations to get vaccinated by certain year. So we know that there are already discrepancy between countries, and whereas, for example, some countries are almost there, other countries have really still quite some milestones
Bulgaria,
to achieve.
Romania.
So, for example, so if we could divide them, like I mentioned, maybe it could help. And another example, very briefly, so we have the European core health indicators, and they were in fact based on some Horizon projects, preliminary, for example, bridge projects. They were updated in 2017, and the last updates, which I was able to trace, were in 2021. But of course, we have to keep pace with technological innovation. So, for example, here I would also propose some modernization, incorporation, additional indicators, for example, for monitoring digital health adoption, for genetic methods, genetic medicine, better standardization, for example, patients-related outcomes. And sometimes we observe also some delays in collecting these indicators, like 1-2 years. So if we could connect these data to electronic health data space, also in the broader context of European data space, we could monitor these indicators on a real-life basis, real-time basis. And I think this could also facilitate certain activities and our conclusions and outcomes. Thank you.
Yeah, I could continue what actually was said here, because that was also the impression of the coordinators of the project, that currently the evaluation process is focused on excellence, which means that scientists put the novelty over the application to patients very often. And of course, this is the role, because they are scientists and they would like to, you know, push this threshold farther and farther. But from the patient's perspective, it is not necessarily the best way to move forward. Yes. So this is one aspect for sure that should be taken in consideration when we are thinking now about the next framework program. What Irene mentioned today in the morning, that now we are at this also specific times that there are already starting the discussions about 10th framework program, where maybe there is a time also to implement some digital evaluation tools, taking into consideration also this monitoring phases that will be carried out later on, including this patients-driven indicators and metrics. But also what coordinators suggested was maybe to think about composition of the projects that takes into consideration the synergy and synergy between the projects that were funded, for example, within one call, and alignment to this long-term strategies. How do they fulfill through the whole project pathway? So these are also some remarks that were already highlighted, and maybe it's good to be taken into account when preparing the next framework for the evaluation.
Really interesting. So a counter question. So I was raised in this excellence paradigm in the Netherlands. So we have now a generation from 20, 25 years onwards who made a career. Everything they did was in this sort of way of thinking. They are now in the boards, managing research departments, etc. So do you think it's sufficient, thinking practically, if we develop these indicators? Is this sufficient, or do we add something to make the change a reality?
The metrics are not sufficient, for sure. And what was said actually, that in US, this tolerance for failure is much bigger. And if we don't change the mindset, also in this young generation of scientists, that they are starting their scientific careers, we will end up in 20 years with the same discussions. Yes, so here for sure, this is, and that was also raised, that this that people are afraid of the failures. And also when they write the project, and when they write it, they are very ambitious. But then when they execute it, then they realize that there is no space for failures there. And they prefer to do it in silos instead of trying to go out and search for the complementarities with other projects, because they perceive them very often as their competitors, which should not be the case according to this open science policy that should be implemented also within the European project. So yeah. I would say that the soft skills, and this is also interesting because many groups mentioned about the different workshop about the exploitation, that they would like to learn how to do it because they are scientists. And they said, we were not educated to do this application phase. So, or you give us someone that will help us to do that, or please educate us that we can do that on our own.
Very good. Martin, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I agree with that, of course. And also, I think that AI could be a very useful tool, especially because being able to address unstructured data. But I wanted to come back to the patients and also give another indicator that could be the place of the patient into the research. And there I have to say that there I'm not happy with them at the moment, just because, no, I'm straightforward, I'm sorry, but this is the fact. At the moment, we are not considered as patients as partners. Why? We are not able to lead a work package. We have to be subcontractor, which is in a sense not so nice, but also this means that we have to pay our VAT bill, meaning when we get a budget, we have to withdraw the VAT. This is just finance, but this in Brussels, in Belgium, this is 21%. It's not nothing. So this is the first thing, and the other thing is that, for example, my patient organization is a global one. We are very committed in Europe. We do a lot of things, and we are the only specialist in our condition, and we are denied to take part to any ERDERA research project unless we want to volunteer for that, because we are funded by the industry for more than 50%. And I can't understand that, because if we are not funded by the industry, nobody else will fund us. We have no public funding at all. So there is something wrong there. And in addition to that, also, because prompts, for example, are really trendy, and I'm an advocate for that, patient self-reported outcomes or experiences. If you want to have a significant project with in the frame of a research program, and you have a ceiling for the funding for those who are eligible, not us, of 25K for 3 years, what do you do with that? I'm sorry. In addition to dissemination of research, which is what we are asked as well, for hiring people for trials and also dissemination, because this is part of research. And the physicians mostly say that we are very good at that, better than them, they say. So I wanted to say the place of the patient is really crucial, and we should be considered not as minors, but as real partners.
Yeah. So before we go to Kasia, one additional question is, so the commission, the health commissioner, he cut budgets on NGOs. Many of the NGOs, whether they are more professional organizations or patient organizations, I think it's cut currently. So they're lacking funding. Do you think it's a public responsibility to support patient organizations, representatives, to do this type of things, other than also provide this outcome, let's say, data?
I am in a difficulty to answer that question, because we have no public funding at all. On another hand, I think that public funding should always be linked to projects, because I think this is a way to achieve and to have results. So I don't know really about the reality of cutting funds for NGOs, honestly. But when we want to take part to a research program, we should be funded and also be accountable for the funding we got.
Right. Kasia.
So I will just answer also this question, because for me, the patient organizations should be funded by public for at least one reason, that public don't want us to be funded by the big corporations, because then always you will be skewed some way. But I wanted to build for the ERDERA, and I challenged this approach, exactly as you said, because in the official presentation there was not patient organization. Like, of course, you have no chance, most probably, to get a grant if the patient organization is the leader of the consortium. But that is another example of the beauty of having 27 countries in European Union, because the answer why they didn't fund it is not because the European Commission didn't want to. They've seen that the patient organizations should be the equal partner. It was questioned by the member countries, because on the member countries level, it is not everywhere possible that the patient organizations are funded in the projects like that. And for example, in Poland, actually, we can be the equal partner. So we have the...
But hospitals cannot be...
hospitals also can
Not
be.
in the area.
Not all.
Mm-hmm. But we...
That was the official answer.
Yeah. Very good. So I want to go to the last part. And so listening to the discussion, so we might add some things, we might do something in reporting. So Natalia, so how do we prevent or reduce bureaucracy and redundant sort of indicators and go more, which is more aligned to a future vision on life sciences? How do we create impact, societal benefits, etc., economic benefits, in a way that it is also very lean and meaningful? What is your take on this?
Yeah, so already under the Polish presidency, the Polish presidency expressed commitments to improve regulations in terms of transparency, maybe the level, the burden of reporting, etc., etc. So these were words, and then activities came. So there are also some legislative instruments implemented. For example, the Small Business Act, which is especially relevant for startups, because the main principle is to take into account startups in practically in all regulations. Think about impact which certain regulations can have on small and medium-sized businesses. So it's called, this principle is called think first small. So I think it's already a very good start to proceed in this way, and this for sure will reduce and reduces already the burden, the administrative burden and overload of regulations, because these two aspects were mentioned already by small and medium-sized enterprises in multiple surveys issued by the European Commission.
So in the upcoming strategies and programs and project calls, we should look forward to these sort of examples where we can start with using this sort of indicators.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, would it be realistic? What is the timeline in next year or so?
Well, I don't know all details, of course. So I don't know. Maybe my colleagues can support me with these informations. But I know that the proposal has been already that the European Commission has already proposed these legislative instruments. So, of course, you know, the procedures are that the European Commission proposes certain activities, legislative and non-legislative, then it goes to co-legislators, so namely the European Parliament, and then to the Council. Then the feedback goes back again to the Commission. So, I mean, this is how it works. So these steps cannot be omitted, because all sides have something to comment on, right?
Absolutely. So we're almost at the end of our discussion. So can I ask shortly a reaction, a message on the indicators, how we should move forward for the next years to make it more impactful and relevant?
Yeah, I think that the EU has a system that protects the users and the patients, which we don't want to jeopardize. but it's not designed for innovation. So there we have to set some kind of objective and the indicators that go with, and we have mentioned some, to achieve this goal. And I think that we have quite some example with sandboxes, for example, in some kind of medicine or all, especially for very rare diseases that can be very interesting. So yeah, let's keep hopeful, and I think we have tracks. And this is what we hear. The willingness is here, the consensus almost, and now this is how and when.
Okay, Kasia.
So from my perspective, definitely the indicators that support patient outcomes and which speed up the processes. So for sure, ensuring open science and collaboration, the indicators should support it.
Thank you. Natalia?
I would say, just keep it simple and consistent, and keep the feedback loop up to date.
Thank you. And last one?
In addition to all what was said, actually, what I would add would be the non-prescriptive, but more open to development, and for sure synergize and align the projects that are granted, so to make the best out of money that were already invested in the project.
Thank you so much. And I also like this idea of that this sort of interaction also with the reviewers. For example, that's not a final judgment, and that you should be afraid of presenting your results and maybe some failures. But it is a sort of dialogue, an ongoing dialogue for improvement. So please, a warm applause for our excellent panel, and thank you so much. And we will provide a summary tomorrow morning, also with the other sessions.
This was exciting days, but we would like to ask you to stay with us a little bit longer, since we prepared networking event hosted by one of the organizers, Klaster LifeScience Kraków. Of course, it will be a great opportunity to share insight, thoughts, to network, to know each other, to ask further questions. But what is, I think, the most important, that we prepared a play for you. So it's quite unusual, since I know that in life science conferences, there are no such a place, there are no such a way of networking. So please be with us at the second floor. This is called exhibiting hall, I suppose. If I remember correctly, this is the place where we had a lunch and breaks. So we are starting this part of event at 5 p.m. and be with us, feel invited. And if you are not interested in this this way of spending evening, we simply wish you a great time in Kraków, lovely evening, and be with us tomorrow, because this is two-day conference. And let me repeat that tomorrow we are starting a little bit earlier, so be with us since 8 a.m. since there will be a coffee, networking, hugging, etc. But the conference will start about 9. So thank you, and see you in about 11 minutes on the second floor of this venue, and we are going to start the networking event hosted by Kraków Life Science Cluster. See you soon, and thank you for today.